Coming up on Arirang News, the South Korean government announces the details of its proposed fourth extra budget for this year, about $6.6 billion to help people affected by the pandemic and by recent natural disasters. Separate from the budget, the government is allocating another $3.9 billion in emergency support for the economy and the country's quarantine efforts. That's around $10 billion in total. And South Korea's foreign minister is calling for talks to resume between the two Koreas and the United States as soon as possible. She took part in 3 multilateral meetings on Wednesday in which she stressed the importance of peace on the peninsula. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa attended a series of international meetings yesterday, virtually, of course, because of the pandemic. She called for the two Koreas and the U.S. to resume dialogue as soon as possible and for the wider Asian region to work together on COVID-19 and other issues. Yoon Jung-min reports.
At a series of multilateral virtual meetings on Wednesday, Seoul's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa urged for the prompt resumption of talks for the complete denuclearization and lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. During the ASEAN +3 meeting, Kang said talks between Seoul, Pyongyang, and Washington should be resumed at the earliest possible date. She added that South Korea remains committed to its stance of resolving the issue through dialogue. At the East Asia Summit, which was also attended by the U.S. and China, the minister stressed the need for regional cooperation on that issue.
This is a crucial period for Korean Peninsula peace process. It is imperative that we strengthen the efforts to achieve the faithful implementation of the agreements reached and declared before the world by the 3 leaders.
She also called for regional cooperation to tackle COVID-19, bringing up experiences of past outbreaks. Kang also urged the ASEAN region to adopt a fast-track entry system to facilitate essential trips while working together on developing and securing a vaccine.
With the experience of the SARS epidemic in 2003, the ASEAN +3 cooperation mechanism mobilized into action at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And new and constructive ideas were drawn, such as the COVID-19 ASEAN Response Fund.
On the issue of the South China Sea, Kang said during the East Asia Summit that South Korea is against any actions that may escalate tensions in the region, highlighting the need for freedom of navigation. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea's daily cases of the coronavirus continue to fall. Over the past week, they've come down from almost 450 to around 150. If they can get below 100, then it's more likely that Seoul can ease up on its strict social distancing. Kim Hyun-sung reports.
South Korea on Wednesday confirmed 155 new cases of COVID-19, almost all of them transmitted locally. Of those, almost a third were in Seoul. 10 of the cases are part of a new cluster infection at Yonsei Severance Hospital, prompting the hospital to close the affected ward and to temporarily stop offering outpatient care. This is the 8th day in a row the daily number has been below 200, representing a big decline from late August when there were more than 400 in a single day. But officials are warning against complacency. Health Minister Bang Nung-woo said that sporadic cluster infections can unexpectedly pop up from small gatherings in markets and quickly spread among friends and family. The concern is that with numbers coming down, a false sense of security could lead to another surge.
Please remember the merchants who had to close their shops and are now in despair. Please think of our children who still can't see their friends at school, even now in the second semester.
Health officials are doing everything they can to contain the virus, but they say the entire nation has to cooperate with the government's prevention measures to bring the number of cases down.
To keep the trend going down and to make sure our disease control is stable, I ask you to truly focus on practicing social distancing.
After monitoring the numbers this coming weekend, officials will announce whether the level 2.5 social distancing measures in the Greater Seoul area will be extended or eased. In the meantime, officials are strongly urging people to stay at home for the last 4 days of this week. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
South Korean government has finalized plans for a fourth extra budget to support people impacted by the pandemic. Worth over $6.5 billion, it's aimed at cushioning the blow from the pandemic by providing customized support for the people and industries hardest hit. Kim Min-ji reports.
The government's fourth extra budget of the year has been set at 7.8 trillion won, or roughly $6.6 billion. It'll be used to provide tailored support focused on the most vulnerable industries and people affected by the resurgence of COVID-19.
피해가 가장 큰 업종과 계층에 집중하여 최대한 두특배 지원하는 피해 맞춤형 재난 지원 성격의 추경입니다. 정부로서는 최선을 다한 금액이지만 피해에 비하면 매우 부족한 액수일 것입니다. 부족하더라도 어려움을 견뎌내는 데 힘이 되기를 바랍니다.
About half of the budget will be focused on support for the self-employed and small merchants. That'll include cash payments of up to about $1,700 for some 2.9 million people. Over $1 billion will be used to save more than 1.1 million jobs. Part of the budget will be directed at easing the burden of childcare by raising the age limit for child benefits, meaning that over 5 million people can get help. Another portion will be used to give South Koreans aged 13 and over a one-off discount of about $17 off their phone bills to provide consolation to people enduring the pandemic.
생존의 위협에 처한 분들을 위해서는 빠른 지원이 절실합니다. 국회의 신속한 처리를 당부드리며 정부 각 부처는 추석 전에 가능한 최대한 지원이 이루어질 수 있도록 집행 준비에 곧바로 착수하여 국회 통과 즉시 실행될 수 있도록 최선을 다해 주기 바랍니다.
The extra budget will be financed through the issuance of state bonds. It's the first time in almost 6 decades that the government has drawn up 4 extra budgets in one fiscal year. Earlier this year, the government used an extra budget to hand out emergency relief payments of up to $1 million won, or about $840 to all households.
President Moon asked for understanding that there was no choice this time but to take a more tailored approach to maximize the effect of limited financial resources, especially when no one knows when the pandemic will end. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
In addition to the extra budget, the Finance Ministry has announced another spending package worth at least $3.9 billion to support quarantine measures and boost the economy. The money will be used to pay for COVID-19 testing, housing people in quarantine facilities, helping hospitals that are running out of money, and other measures. In terms of the economy, the money will be used for investing in public facilities and to help exporters go online to find buyers in the pandemic. Combined with the fourth extra budget, it's a support package worth around $10 billion, which the finance minister said will be implemented rapidly. The number of people in South Korea who are self-employed has been falling for 8 months in a row because of the pandemic. This is according to the Korea Small Business Institute and Statistics Korea. In August, data show 5.6 million people were self-employed, down 350,000 from a year earlier. The self-employed, many of them who run shops and restaurants, have been among the hardest hit by the strengthened social distancing guidelines and the country's longest monsoon season on record. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, good afternoon and thank you for coming on.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, tech stocks on Wall Street saw a recovery overnight, the so-called 3-day rule applying apparently, so the sell-off came to an end. What's the story in the global markets?
Global stock market is roller coastering these days due to the widened gap between real economic activities and booming stock market prices. We take 1% stock return changes in a day for granted these days after the outbreak of coronavirus, but this 1% changes in a day is such a huge change in normal situation. In yesterday's U.S. stock market, there was a big gain after 3 days of big drops. Dow Jones Industrial increased 1.6%, and NASDAQ particularly increased up to 2.7% in a day.
Right, and Korean stocks higher today as well, especially the tech-heavy Kosdaq. What happened in the Korean markets?
U.S. market gave a positive impact on domestic market today, particularly on high-tech related Kosdaq market. KOSPI increased by 0.9%, and Kosdaq also increased by 1.7% today. In KOSPI market, domestic individual investors and foreign investors together bought stocks, but unusually, domestic institutional investors sold the stock. On the other hand, Kosdaq market is dominated by individual investors' purchase. On the other side, foreign investors and domestic institutional investors sold Kosdaq stocks. So in the next 2 weeks, we have pay more attention on market volatility because market volatility has been structurally increased these days.
Well, now in the news today, Professor, we have President Moon unveiling the government's fourth budget, lots of spending plans in the works. What do you make of these new budgets and the proposed projects?
The second round state relief funds target small business owners and troubled families who are the most affected by pandemic. Discussions are underway to identify the most damaged small business owners and families. So more comprehensive plan for the second round cash out program will be announced sometime in the next week. And in terms of stimulating domestic spending, I think it would be better for selective payment like government's plan today, because the lower income people spends more from government's cash support.
Right, that's a good point. And now we do see that Korean households borrowed a lot more money in August compared to July. Loans were up by almost $10 billion, which is a record increase. Tell us about that.
Commercial banks' household loan increased by the largest amount on record in August. And this is mainly for rising housing prices, including 전세 price, and a continuing rally in stock market. Bank loans to households came to almost 950 trillion won as of end of August. And it is almost 12 trillion won increase from previous month and the largest monthly growth since 2004. Household loan gains are related to buying and renting homes, price increases, and non-mortgage loan is related to meet demand for stock investment and livelihood spending.
Right, and last month we see that Korea saw yet more job losses. 6 months in a row now, the number of people working has been lower than a year ago, and this doesn't yet reflect the tighter social distancing of the last few weeks. What stands out to you in these jobs numbers?
Korean economy lost 274,000 jobs last month, and this downward trend is continued for 6 straight months, which means it is the most protracted downturn in employment since 2008 global financial crisis. The unemployment rate increased by 0.1% up to 3.1% in August. And since there is a resurgence of pandemic and level 2 social distancing is adopted, the September employment data is expected to heavily reflect the effects of stronger social distance nationwide.
We'll have to see how those numbers look the next time around. All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
South Korea has issued new foreign exchange stabilization bonds in U.S. dollars and euros at record low interest rates. Issued on Thursday, the $625 million in dollar bonds carry a rate of 1.198%, or 50 basis points above U.S. Treasuries. The $700 million in euro bonds are at minus 0.59%, making South Korea the first non-European country to offer euro bonds with a negative yield. Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki said these low rates indicate the confidence foreign investors have in the Korean economy. People in Korea now have access to the most advanced treatment for tumors in the eye. Gangnam Severance Hospital is treating eye tumors with contact radiation therapy. With this method, it's not necessary for the eye to be removed to be treated. A radioactive isotope of ruthenium is used to irradiate the tumor and remove it. The treatment does not hurt a person's eyesight as much, and recovery only takes about a week. It's also covered by Korea's national health insurance. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.